Yo, 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 it's Our Lifestyle, the podcast. And this is the next video in our flip through series of the famed Mini Truckin magazine. And I want to give a huge shout out to Garage Gear Clothing. I'm rocking their hat. It's got this really cool deal underneath it, blue or red. I think there's a couple of different colors. And we couldn't do our podcast without our good family over there at Garage Gear Clothing. Visit their website, garagegearclothing.com, and also follow their YouTube channel, as Lonnie does a great job posting videos. Make sure you watch them all the way through. And guess what? They're short and sweet. Love their walkarounds at shows. They were at Orange Beach Invasion recently, so big ups to them. So, getting really good feedback and want to keep producing these videos. So, I got a couple things I want to share with you guys today. This is Mini Truckin magazine issue number 5. And let's jump right in. Now, I also want to say today's a very special day. So to all my friends out there, I know for many, they love this date, 420. And for me, it's a great day because The Chronic, which is basically my favorite album of all time, is now available on all streaming platforms. After Dre had signed with Apple selling Beats, they essentially had the exclusive on it. And for those that don't, have tapes or CDs or, music uploaded through Google Play Music and whatnot, then you have to go to streaming, which I stream every day. So it's pretty cool to have access to that via Spotify, which is my primary streaming platform. But with that being said, let's jump in here. We've got really a classic. You got fall 89, so 31 years ago this fall, this issue came out. And you can see from the title, this is the 5th issue of the magazine, and it's really highly coveted. This is, again, one that I'm very happy to own. And this truck right here, Red Hot, I essentially saw this at my first mini truck run. For me, was 96 from what my memory serves, and I have photos of it to show that I was there at Slamfest. And we did something really cool this past year at Slamfest. I took my photos of this truck and I held them up in the same place where the truck was parked, and I kind of took this really cool kind of retrospective type photo. And that was something that I got inspired from a lady on Instagram. It's called like Film Tourism or something like that, and she does that but with movie content. So very cool stuff. But anyways, enough with that. You have a classic cover, Red Hot and Blue Bayou, the Nissan, 2 Nissans, and love that it's a beach scene. You have the surfboard. I mean, look at those shorts, right? The shoes. Many of you guys can reminisce back to those awesome times, and the moulets. But to me, I really like this issue, and this one's getting harder to get, as many of the early years, as I've said, that I call them, especially the 80s, 88, the 1, and then the 4 and 89, and then even getting into 90 and up. So these are highly coveted. So let's jump in. You got the Radical tops. This one is in such pristine condition. You can see there, I'm not even going to push down on it. These bindings on these are really nice, on this one at least, and it's one of the good years in terms of, the bindings were really good in the early days. So Radical tops, you guys remember this, man, it captures the time period, and who wouldn't go back and buy, 50 of these things right now and save them, because people are looking for this stuff all day. There's a couple of cool Facebook groups. I know Michael Jennings, we had him on the podcast. He's building the mini truck that was in the Kid and Play movie. So Lucille, he's got a bunch of old school stuff, and there's a bunch of people out there that are always looking for this stuff. So Radical tops, again, big advertiser back then. You got the tilt beds on the rise on the right. Make sure you check 2 hashtags for tilt beds. We got ours, which is our little spin on the rise. So tilt beds on the rise with the DA, and then tilt bed evolution. That's the homie that runs the Facebook group, but he also hashtags tilt bed evolution a lot on Instagram. So we try to do that as well. So of course you've got, I'm not even going to get into the numbers. I've mentioned this before and on the podcast. The numbering system is real screwy. That's another reason why I'm going over this to make, set the record straight. But this is issue 5. And you had that little trick that they would do for whatever reason. They would put that in landscape versus portrait and get you to spin the magazine, right? So Steve Stilwell, just to be clear, he was the first editor of the magazine. Alan Paradise shot the cover on this one, if I remember correctly. And Alan played a huge role in the magazine, but Steve Stilwell was technically the editor. So editor number 1 for those scoring at home. We'll go through and talk about how many editors there were and things like that as we get through these series. And then we'll continue to talk about that on our lifestyle podcast, which is that free podcast that you can listen to via your favorite podcast app. So Trick Trucks, pretty cool, old school stuff. Again, if nothing else, just looking through these magazines, reminiscent about the good old days. Paper cuts, these are the questions that were submitted. And you see a lot of ads, black and white. I mean, check this out. Cars in the magazine early on. More ads, down and dirty. The Top Broker, convertible tops. No wonder people were freaking putting those on, man. You can get them for a decent deal back then, right? So this was pretty cool. News brief, and it shows Yokohama Tires. Yokohama Tires expands headquarters. And, they were basically covering the news as, the media outlets like Truckin and Mini Truckin in that day. The GMC Cyclone, so this is a highly coveted vehicle. You'll see, this one's pretty cool too. Like, check out the wheels. Jay Leno's Garage, I want to say he had a Cyclone on recently on YouTube, which is pretty cool. And speaking of YouTube, don't sleep on it. Go out there, Garage Gear Clothing. Check them out. Again, they do very cool videos. They're short videos. And you can visit garagegearclothing.com to order some merchandise. So, Mike hitting the road. Mike Shartsis breaks down. Hitting the road for road trips. And Mike talked about his time at the magazine when we had him on the podcast. So go back and check it out. If you Google like Our Lifestyle Podcast, Mike Shartsis, it'll probably land you on that episode if you want to listen through your browser. Oklahoma Raisin. So a style that was super popular back then with ground effects. You had the cab visor, probably a Lund. I have one of those right now for my C30 that's not installed. Of course, the colors, the wheels, the front end, the light covers, all reminiscent of that time. Now, on the last upload, which was actually yesterday on 4/19, we talked about Audio Chamber. We're going to have Lee Bowers on, and you see here's another one of their epic photo shoots. This one had the Mercedes in it with the chicks talking to the dudes. And if memory serves me right, I think this is the Toyota that Lucky has, I think. If it's the one that was on the cover shortly after, I just don't know. I've never thought about that. It very well could be, or someone could chime in, maybe including Lucky. High-tech convertible top. So again, the key here was they did a lot of tech, and that carried over throughout all the years. Now, there may not have been tech in every single issue, but you could imagine if you were the editor, it helped fill some space, but also gave people, I'm sure in those early days, the motivation, because there weren't places like Street Source and different forums that we started to see kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s. And now, of course, love it or hate it, Facebook has taken over. So that's where we share most of our information. California Fender trim. Check out those chicks, right? The haircuts. I'd take that truck any day. Road Test Challenge. So you have, these seem to be kind of harder to find. A good solid extended cab. Got the Isuzus on the rise. And the on the rise, as you guys may know if you listen, that's our little thing. Tony Boss Bolin kind of started the on the rise, and we've just really kind of carried that on. So shout out to Boss Bolin. Blue Bayou, this is one of the cover trucks. It's a multi-cover truck. You got tilt beds, on the rise, of course, tilt bed evolution, and just a really cool truck. I'm telling you, man, if this thing came out today, I mean, it captures the time period, and it's very awesome styling for that time. As with many of these features, You had black and white at some portion of the feature, even for a cover truck. Again, because the printing cost was much cheaper. Guide to buying used trucks. Still an ad, Rocky's Truck Stop. And then boom, Red Hot, the famed truck. Now, rumor has it this truck has been in a garage all these years, and the owner still or the original owner still has it. And it's not auto-focusing there. Super awesome truck. I forget the last year it was out, if it was late 90s, early 2000s, but this thing was smoking. Hence the name Red Hot, right? And I'm doing all this, as I've kind of been mentioning, some of you guys are probably getting sick of this. This is just kind of a manual thing I'm doing, just holding the phone, no overhead rig, so to speak. Just trying to kind of keep it authentic. You're seeing what I'm seeing. And I have went through these magazines a couple of times, not every issue, but most of them. And I'm just kind of plugging away at some of the data side of it in terms of the type of trucks in the magazine and whatnot. Trying to digitize, if you will. Here's Mini Truckin Marquee. So new lineup, and I mentioned on the last video, you get a chance to see some of the trucks in here. And whether these were just, they didn't have as many photos or whatever, it still was awesome because this was always color, and you had the film type artwork. So it kind of gave it that feel of, hey man, here's some cool trucks on the scene. And of course that tied into Mini Truckin Marquee. Now, when I count the features in these magazines, I usually don't count those, even though, I mean, you really could, but it was kind of more of a sub-feature in my opinion. Hot Tops. And this was the continuation guide to buying used trucks, or buying a used truck. This was pretty cool, fitting the image, and Courtney did this over the years, even in street trucks one time, where they did like the styling of the 80s or 90s or whatever time period. And to me, like all these colors, I've always been a fan of the pink colors, especially with different contrasting. I've got a 64 Lincoln that's blue, and the pink just really kind of goes with it, and it drives off of that 80s feel, that vibe. But look, check it out, Vision Streetwear, Truckin Magazine. I mean, if you had these hats that like were never worn or put in like a plastic bag, I mean, you could sell that stuff for gold. The BMX stuff, the skateboard stuff, all that stuff sells for a lot of money. And I just wish that we would have knew back then that, or we had the space, right, to even keep it. It's easy to say, yeah, if I could go back, but you know, buying it and having the space is really the key. So Resolutions 1990, and this is where we get a lot of our dates from. So if you look here, December 29th through the 31st, 1989, so 31 years ago this December is when Rezo, and then of course they always had the mascot. We had Bob Hayes on very early in the podcast, so if you guys go back to the beginning, the infancy of our time period, as far as the podcast goes, Mike and I's time, you'll hear Bob on there. Righteous Ragtop, so the ladies of the era were definitely down for modeling. Sunbed license plate. These pages are super thick. I mean, you know, especially the color ones are a little bit thicker, but it's pretty cool to see just, man, what a good production they had of a magazine back then. Mini Truckin Club Directory, this is something they carried on for years and years, and it showed a lot of those clubs. And if you talk to the old school guys like we have, a lot of their chapters started from this club directory where, you know, maybe Negative Camber, Florida, you know, they won a chapter in Florida, and then they called up, you know, Courtney, or called up, you know, so-and-so. And actually, speaking of that, NC Randy talks about that. We've had him on the podcast, and how that Florida chapter started. So, you know, we got to credit this magazine, and just kind of go through a few of these. We got to credit this magazine for doing a lot and helping grow the culture and the scene, so to speak. This ad we saw in the last episode that I did in issue 4. Those glasses, though. All right, so here, August 27th, 1989, you had Cal Truck Jamboree. I want to say the first year was like 88, 89. And that's a show I never went to. I do have some video that I'm not going to tell you how I have some of the video, but I have some video that I'm working on trying to, eventually share from one of those shows, one of the Cal Truck Jamborees. Riding around California Truckorama. And we're winding down here. In this era, you had about 91 pages in the magazine. Now, it did grow, and then it did reduce towards the end. So we'll hit more on that in the near future. This was a pretty cool ad that I like. The back cover, available at your local record store. This is bass. And pretty cool, man, to see this, like a kind of a bass style cassette / CD, or, there you go, hot cassettes, LPs, or CDs. So pretty awesome stuff. But for you collectors out there, this one's getting harder to get. And for you guys that have it, the other reason why I do this, I kind of mentioned yesterday, one of the reasons, but think about this. I've had some of these magazines, not this one, but I've had some of them for a very long time. And unless you've got the space, you really can't even begin to start taking these out and going through them. And it takes time. And then by the time you get them out, you're freaking like, oh man, I got this big mess. Let me put them back. So I've talked to a lot of the OGs and stuff, and they go, man, I got all my magazines, but they're in storage. They're in the attic. They're in here. They're such and such. But this is giving you guys an opportunity to maybe reminisce a little bit about the old days. And that's what we also do on the podcast. Contrary to what some people think is, we don't always just talk about the old, right? We do have people come on the podcast that are current in the scene, including I just went on a podcast called the Future Mini Trucker Podcast. And that audio hopefully will be out soon from those young cats. And they are 15, 16 years old, and they're doing a podcast talking about trucks, and they love the era that we all came from. So we pay homage to the old school, knowing where we came from, wanting to learn that history, but also focusing towards the future on where we could take the scene, where the scene's going. And when you have show promoters like Lonnie and Radar at Lone Star Throwdown, Greg Miller at Scraping the Coast, and so on and so forth, and all the other shows that partner with us, dude, it shows you the scene is alive. And even with the COVID-19 craziness in this world, let's hopefully get past it and move ahead and keep the scene going, because that's what it's about. But not sure that I've got anything else to say except for go out there and stream some DRE. I know many of you guys remember 9 Deuce. This came out in December of 92. So really kind of on the cusp of 93. And if anybody has any tapes, I'm going to throw this out there. I'm working on my tape collection over here. You know what I mean? Little glimpse into the compound. And definitely hit me up and let me know. I'll pay the shipping. But the tape collection's on the rise. And just know we've got so much more to talk about. I'm dropping stuff now. Here's an old little item. Let the Rhythm Hit 'em. Rest in peace again, Sean Mahaney. I mentioned this the other day. He was a huge part of MIC. And we pay homage, like I said, to the old school, but we're also focused on where we're headed. So thanks to everybody that subscribes. If you like what we're doing here, leave a comment. I saw Built to Cruise the other day left a comment. Lonnie and Radar did from Garage Gear Clothing. And it means a lot, because those guys are contributing and have contributed a lot to the scene, and they continue to do so. So last shout out, All Time Low Magazine. Visit atlmagazine.com, order a subscription, buy monthly magazine, and this magazine is well done. Check it out. That's the centerfold. And that's not even the pull-out poster. That's just the centerfold. And we just ordered this shirt the other day from Asphalt Army. That's pretty cool. Big ups to Tony. All right, y'all. Rambling over. ODB. Give us a thumbs up. Click that notification bell. We got you. Peace.